ahead and get started. Okay, so thank you guys all for coming. Welcome to Strategies for Teaching APES. And here we go. I'll first hand it over to Emily. She's going to share first.
Hi, I'm Emily Goff, and as Courtney said, or Chelsea said, I am in Indiana. I teach in Warsaw, Indiana, and I've been teaching for 17 years, and mostly biology and chemistry for a lot of that at all different levels, including AP. And then for the last 9 years, I have loved teaching AP Environmental Science. I also have a lot of experience doing the AP read, so grading the tests in June. I did that for many years with biology, and now I do that for AP Environmental Science. So I'm really excited to share with you all. This is a great course, and I hope we give you some good resources to get you started with it. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is about how intimidating it is to plan for a new course. So I know that when you are a first-year teacher, this is really intimidating. And then no matter how many years of experience you have, when it's a new course to you, it can be very intimidating. So one tip that I have with this is you really need to look at this in a big picture. You cannot just live day to day because that's a great way to run out of time. And so one of the best ways to deal with this is what I call backwards planning, and thinking about when your tests are going to be, and then kind of working backwards from that. And the great thing about doing that with APES is that the College Board actually has provided a lot of great information to help you do that. If you have not yet looked at the course and exam description, which you'll see referred to as the CED, this is a really important resource to get started with. And in the CED, it outlines each of the units and all of the different standards within that unit, but it also will tell you the percent of the test that unit is covered, and it'll also give you a breakdown of how many days, how many class periods you would need to cover each unit. And so this is a really great way for you to see, okay, I should spend about this much time on this unit to make sure that you don't end up falling behind. And even if you teach on a different schedule, like a semester schedule, you can use those percents. You figure out how many days you have and then apply it to that. And so this will really help you to get a better idea of how much time you have to spend on each unit, so that you don't end up in the end of April panicking because you still have 2 more units to cover, because that's a common thing that happens a lot of times when people first start out. The other thing to consider as you're planning it long term is what order you plan on teaching. And so it used to be everybody kind of did their own thing of whatever order they did. And so a lot of times people, even after the CED came out, still would use their own units. There's some advantages to this if you like to teach certain things together that might be in different units. Then you can create your own units. But the downside is that it doesn't really give you the best use of the materials that College Board provides. So going into Unit 1 all the way through to Unit 9, going in your order, that's really one of the best benefits of that, is you're going to be able to use the resources on AP Classroom so much better. And so I did my own units once we had the CED for 1 year, just because that's how I'd always done it. And I very quickly switched over to wanting to go in order because of how much that helped use those resources. Now, a couple of variations with that you'll see are really popular. The first one is some people really like to take Unit 4 and start the year with that, just because it's a very foundational unit, and they like to have those topics covered first, so that then they can refer back to those in the other units. Personally, I still start with Unit 1, but that is one that is really popular with a lot of people too. And then the other thing to consider is Unit 9. So Unit 9 at the end can run the danger of, if you do run low on time, then you end up not having enough time to give Unit 9 as much as it really needs. And the problem with that is Unit 9 is a big unit, and it is a super important unit. So we really don't want to neglect that. So one technique is you can take Unit 9 and you can sprinkle it in different places throughout the course. And so I had heard other people talk about this, and I decided to give it a try a couple of years ago, and I love doing that. So you have topics in Unit 9 on the loss of biodiversity. And so I teach that in Unit 2 when we talk about the importance of biodiversity. There are topics in Unit 9 about climate change and its impacts. I pull that into Unit 4 when we talk about climate and what affects our climate. And then there are topics about stratospheric ozone loss, and those work really well in Unit 7 when we're talking about air pollution. So there's pros and cons to each of these, and there are a lot of experienced APES teachers who have taught each of these. So you go with your gut of which one sounds good to you. You're going to find resources and people that can guide you on how to use those. So once you kind of have your big picture plan, then you kind of get in that panic mode and you think, whoa, I only have 10 class periods for this unit. How am I going to fit everything in? So my next tip is a little bit about how you can maximize that class time, because you have this massive amount of content to deliver. You really have to figure out how to be strategic about using your class time. So the first idea is a technique called flipped classroom. If you haven't heard that term, it's the idea that instead of spending your majority of your class time delivering information, lecturing, then you want to move that as their homework and instead use your class time to do practice, to do labs, to do activities, to answer questions. And so some people choose to do this for the entire thing. So all of their lectures are all videos that students are watching outside of class time. I don't do it completely flipped. There's some other experienced APES teachers that can be great resources for you if that seems like something you might want to do. But you can also do it in smaller ways. So one thing that I developed a couple of years ago is I sat down and looked at each of the units and I thought, okay, this topic is something that they know from a previous class, or it's a really easy topic for them to pick up. For example, in Unit 1, the things about the food web and food chains. So I made a video of notes about those topics, and they get that as a homework assignment, and that frees up some class time that I don't have to talk about those in class. So that's one thing to consider for helping you to maximize that class time. The other thing that I think is really helpful is routines, because the more that you have routines, the less time that you have to spend explaining new things, and the students get used to that. So there's a lot of different ways you can do routines. One is to have some themed days. You'll see people talk about doing FRQ Friday, or they'll do Math Wednesday, and that way they make sure that they're hitting those writing skills, those math skills on a regular basis. Another thing is using those AP classroom tools like the progress checks. If you always assign those at the same time within the unit and use them in the same way, the students will get used to that, and that really helps things go a lot smoother. Another one is with the textbook. So creating a routine with your textbook is going to be super helpful as well. And so all AP classes, you are required to have a textbook for your students, but there are many different textbooks to choose from. The one that I currently am using is the Friedland and Relia book, edition 4, which is the newest one that is the only one that is actually aligned with the CED and uses those units. So I picked that because of that reason, and also I had already previously been using an earlier edition, so I was familiar with that book. But you get this textbook, how do you make sure your kids are actually using it? You don't want it to just be something that just sits there and they never use it. So a couple of things that you will see people do is using reading guides that they have to fill out as they're doing their reading. What I have started doing is reading quizzes. And I used to do these quizzes in class. And that's one of those examples of reflecting about how I was using my class time. I have now moved to, and it was helped by also when we had a lot of remote learning. I couldn't do that anymore. How do I make these quizzes effective when they're doing them at home? So I now use reading quizzes as a homework assignment, and they are open book, open note, but they have a time limit set to them. And that becomes a routine for my students, and they get used to that. And then they know I need to be reading the book throughout the week. And then I have this quiz is going to be due each week. So again, that's kind of a combo of how important it is to have routines, but then also using that textbook well. And one of the best things that you can do if you are asking questions like, how do I decide which textbook to use, is to go to that APES Facebook group. I am assuming a lot of you are already in that group, since I think that might be how you found out about this meeting. But if you are not, make sure you look for that AP Environmental Science Teachers Facebook group. It is a private group, so you have to answer some questions and get pulled in. But once you are, this link will take you to a post that I put in there just a month ago. That'll be really helpful to you of how to really make the most use out of that Facebook group, because it is an amazing resource for you. Some people aren't as familiar with how to use Facebook, and sometimes things get tossed around on that group. Oh, look in the drive. Well, where is the drive? So this link is going to show you with screenshots and step-by-step instructions for both a desktop or a mobile browser, how you can search the files on the group itself, how you can find that shared Google Drive as well. And I have just found it has been a great way to find a lot of answers quickly, because you can search for something like textbook and you'll see previous discussions of all the pros and cons of the various textbooks. And it's been a way for me to get to see awesome ideas, because everybody has different awesome ideas to share. And one of those is from Chelsea. So I'm going to turn it over to her to share a little bit about her experiences with how to effectively teach math.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. And that, I don't know if you already did, Courtney, but maybe put that link in the chat for everyone so that they can get to it, of how to get to the Facebook resources. Cool. Thanks. Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm Chelsea. I teach at Notre Dame High School in Salinas, which is an all-girls school, and I teach on a year-long schedule. This is year 14 for me, teaching APES and physics and math. Well, I haven't taught all those classes that many years, but those are the main classes I teach. And then for the last 4 years, I've been an AP reader. My degrees are in earth and environmental science, but I have a lot of my experience with math and physics. And I've also now added to this list that I've been the author of the environmental science course on positive STEM. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about that. First, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about just going off of what Emily was talking about, starting with that big picture in mind. When we were thinking about how you want to structure all the units, you also really want to be thoughtful about how to include the science practices. So the 7 science practices that are part of our course, this might be small on your screen, depending on what screen you're on. So we'll also share this slide, but this is in the course and exam description as well. So there's a lot of different things that are skills that students are going to have to do and practice for the exam, and that we want them to get comfortable with, just like as little environmental scientists and critical thinkers. The data analysis and mathematical routines, so practice 5 and 6, are kind of my like passion project of all of the practices. And I know the math can be really intimidating. So I want to have you guys think about for a little bit, how much does the math matter? I know a lot of teachers that I've talked to are a little bit nervous about teaching the math, or skip over it, or just say they don't want to worry about it too much. But if you look at our recent exam, so here in this last May, my score report that I looked at from our scores shows how many questions out of the 80 multiple choice questions each of the science practices were. So 13 of those 80 questions related to data analysis, and 6 of those questions related to mathematical routines. And for the free response question, it's always structured that there's 3 questions for a total of 30 points. 6 points in question 3 are for calculations, for showing work and for showing your answers. And then at least 2 points from question 2 are going to be something about data analysis, something about interpreting a graph. So altogether, this is roughly a quarter of the exam involves some part of analyzing data or reasoning quantitatively in the class. So it's not something that you want to ignore entirely. I think it's worth putting in the effort to help the students feel prepared. And then the test aside, math is a really useful tool for evaluating if a problem, like an environmental problem or environmental solution, is going to have the impact that you want it to have. When we're thinking about the cost of solar panels versus if these solar panels are reducing your carbon footprint, little things like this or big things like this, those are math problems that students would solve, and maybe solve as adults too when they're trying to make those environmental decisions for their life. So I think it's really important to help empower students to feel like math is a tool to help them make good environmental decisions and learn about being sustainable stewards of the environment. So usually I had in the past given worksheets for students to practice looking at data and working with math, doing the quantitative part of the class. But some problems that I saw with that is that the answers are on the internet if you're using another person's resource. And then also that students copy each other. So if you spend all the time to make your own worksheet, it's really hard to not have kids sharing answers. There's a lot of reasons why students cheat. One of the reasons I think that students cheat is just that they get a problem that they don't know what to do, and then they cheat to get the answer, and then they still don't learn how to solve the problem. So then they're stuck in this vicious cycle. And that's really hard to get out of that vicious cycle with cheating. So I think students need more scaffolding and more practice, which is the big part of why I created the environmental science course on positive STEM. So I want to show you guys a few things about this. I started out a little over 2 years ago working on these problems, doing all just the calculation-based questions, but since then I've added other data analysis and other science practices and some vocabulary. So all of these links we'll make sure you guys can get to later if you want to check this too, but I'm going to switch over to sharing some of my screen. So what you would see if you click over into positivestem.org. So there's all these different courses available. The environmental science course, let me increase the size of this a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So I have units for all of the 9 units of the course plus review. And some of the units, for instance, like unit 3, I broke up into multiple parts. So we have unit 3A for populations and ecosystems and unit 3B for human population, so that they're roughly the same amount. Going off of what Emily talked about of having routines in your class, I have used this as a routine in my classroom to give students time to practice something after we've talked about it. So I wanted to show you as a calculation-based question first, an albedo question. So this one, and then also I just added today this reference page. So hopefully this adds, yeah. So I added this reference page that you guys can see with all the different equations that we use throughout the course in one place. And so this will come up for all of the lessons. So we're going to do some percent change problems, which is new minus old over old. And there's a little introduction about albedo. And then we have a problem. Is this the one I wanted to do? Yes. Okay. So we have a problem where a company is considering purchasing an area of forest to convert into an asphalt parking lot. What will be the percent change in albedo for this area? So we have a little setup where they have to show their work for this new minus old over old calculation. And in this problem, the new one is going to be the asphalt. And then sorry, do 2 things at once. As they type it in, they can check their answers. And if they get it wrong, so if they didn't know which one to put there, it has a little X, but then they get to try again and check their answers. And then it's light green if they took more than one try. Important to note that all these numbers in blue or words in blue means that it's a randomized variable, so that if students are working on this in class or for homework, they have different numbers here. So not everyone has 5.2% asphalt. So they're going to come up with different answers. And then they would calculate this out. And this was a negative 67.5%. And there's some follow-up questions here about if this is an increase and decrease in albedo. What will this mean for amount of solar radiation? And then they have several different questions in a row that are really similar to practice that. So that's an example of a calculation-based skill. I also have on here, oh, that's not the one I wanted. Is this the one I want? Yeah, okay. I also have on here, like I was saying, like some data analysis tools or graph reading skills. So this is an example of one with the soil texture triangle. And so reading the soil texture triangle, they have to read the 3 different axes. So it's a little bit different than something they've done before. And again, these are all randomized. So students will all have different percents that they're trying to figure out. And then questions get scrambled. So they won't be able to just say to each other, yeah, the first one is going to be clay. They have to all do the problem and figure it out, how to read it, and then have lots of practice to read it. And then, like I was saying, besides the calculations, I also have been focusing on trying to help them practice some of the other science practices like experimental design. And so this one is also from Unit 4. Oh, I forgot, did I mention? Sorry, all of these examples were from Unit 4 to kind of piggyback off of what Emily was saying, that a lot of people like to start with Unit 4 as their first unit. So if that's you, if you want to start off with Unit 4, these were all examples from the Earth Science section of the course. So this is also going to be randomized. They have a problem with a watershed study that's looking at turbidity and slope. And so they're looking at a data table, and then they're trying to decide based on this problem, which thing is slope? Is it a constant variable, a dependent variable, and an independent variable? And then you could practice that the thing that you're looking to see what has an effect is going to be the independent variable. And then it says that this data is from a temperate deciduous forest in summer. So that means we have constants of the biome and the time of year. And so students could practice their practice the experimental design terms within the context of something from the content. So doing those science practices within the context of the units as you go all the time. So did we have any questions I could answer or things I could elaborate on? I feel like I went faster than I planned through those examples.
We've had a couple questions about paying for it, so.
Okay, so those
what all is included in a free account?
Yes, so a free account, which you can log in and make, has the first 5 units. So I can show you what would be included in that on the dashboard here. So that would be 1, 2, both parts of Unit 3, and then the first part of Unit 4. Everyone can use that with all your classes for free all year long. Also the review unit, so the semester review and then the final review, which just have questions from all the other units, those are also free. Then the pricing information, there's a link to that. If you try it and you want to keep using it all year long, there's a link on the slide for the pricing quote. So it just depends on like you as a teacher, if you how many classes you have, and if other teachers at your school are going to be using it too. It also, like the prices for the subscription are for using anything from Positive STEM. So if you teach environmental science and chemistry or biology or I can't remember what the other things are, but chemistry and physics and environmental science are the main ones that are full courses. And then there's some beta courses that are also free. So engineering is free and biology is free. And then you can do these other classes, chemistry and physics and physical science for the full year for the subscription. So maybe we could put that link to the pricing quote in the chat. And then so everyone can check for their situation, how much it would be. And then this link for teacher directions has instructions for signing up too. Were there any other questions I could help with before I pass it over to Courtney to talk about FRQs? All right.
And always you can put your questions in the chat too. And we should have a little time at the end to double back. So, all right. Well, I am Courtney Gazelle. I teach at Jordan High School in Durham, North Carolina. I've been teaching for about 19 years and I've been doing APES for about 3. but it's unique in that we have a semester format. So I do the whole APES program in a semester, and that's a whole different animal than doing a year. So if you guys are in the same boat I am and you need a pacing guide, please reach out, because I can help you out there. It's very, very fast. So I did AP reading for the first time last summer with these two. I met these ladies, and it was a great experience. I'd recommend it to anybody. I learned a ton. And so yeah, I'm here to talk to you about FRQs. Chelsea mentioned how, like, as teachers, we have to prep them for writing about environmental solutions and design and math. And we could not end tonight without talking about FRQs, because it is 40% of the overall score in May. And so we don't want to blow it off. And one of the whole FRQs is with the math. So very, very important. Okay, so I've thrown around FRQ a couple times. You should probably know it means free response question. That's basically College Board's version of an essay question on their test. Let's just start with a couple tips. Most importantly, you need to teach your kids how to write them properly. And if you've taken your APSI class yet, I'm sure your teacher has talked to you about this. And if you've not taken an APSI class yet, you need to do it sooner than later. I'm going to kind of down in my resources. I'll talk to you a little bit. I have some resources for you if you have not taken an APSI class, and how you can help teach your kids to write them. A good example of how it can go wrong is, us readers, we have very specific guidelines when we read. And a lot of the kids last summer were throwing around species and organism. And we can't take that. We have to teach our kids to be specific. And so they have to say things like cactus is a desert tolerant plant, not a species of desert tolerant plants. So that leads me to my next tip. Don't grade them easy. Don't go easy on them, because we can't expect them to be specific in May, but then grade them easy all year. So follow the scoring rubric the College Board gives you, and then always go over their FRQs with them and explain to them, this is why you didn't get the point. This is why this one got the point, so they can see and improve throughout the year. All right, so let's talk about resources to help you get going. Every year, I do a FRQ boot camp for about the first month and a half of school. And I am an FRQ Friday teacher. I like doing that. And like Emily said, it creates routine. So they know every Friday they're going to do a little FRQ stuff. So what I've done is I've found videos on YouTube that range from writing strategies, annotation, what else? How to score FRQs, and then of course, how to write each of the 3 different types. And I've created for you and my students notes that follow along with those videos, along with practice and examples and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoy that. Use it. I think it has made a huge difference in the confidence of my kids. The other thing that I posted there for you is a task verb graphic organizer. And this is free on the internet. I did not create this. It's beautiful and I love it. But half the battle of teaching your kids to write a good FRQ is teaching them what we expect with a task verb. So I'm going to talk to you about describe for an example. It says right there on the graphic organizer, it needs 2 layers. That means it needs 2 sentences. So if my student says a cactus is a desert tolerant plant, and it's a describe, they will only get 1 out of the 2 points, because then they have to explain why, okay? Or give me the adaptation that makes it a desert tolerant plant. So make sure that they understand what those task verbs are asking, which leads me to our last resource, a task verb card sort. So it's a great, fun, easy match game to kind of help them practice the task verb with what it wants. It'd be a great introduction activity to start doing FRQs. Okay, so I know that it's probably really tempting to just blow off FRQ practice throughout the year, because it does take time, but it also, and I know the kids aren't like super crazy about writing a ton, but that's, I think, one myth I want to debunk with you. So Chelsea, if you'll go to the next slide. I think a lot of teachers think that you can only practice FRQs if you do the whole FRQ with them. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, I recommend that you don't do that. I would save a full FRQ for your unit exams only. And then throughout the rest of the semester or year, just give them little chunks consistently so that they can practice their task verbs and content. So this is what I did last, I started doing this last year, and I saw my FRQ scores go way higher, and it was super easy. The kids actually could handle it and enjoyed it. So they're my FRQ stations. And I have linked my Unit 8 FRQ handout for you so that you can get started as well. Here's an example of one of the questions on that handout. As you can see, it's real short. It's just a sentence. And I bolded my task verb so they know what I'm looking for. And then obviously I work in like maps and data tables and all that as well. And in that picture, you can see my two students. I have the worksheet cut up and I put it around my room, and I like to let them work in groups because we all know as teachers, collaboration is a great way to learn as well. So they move from one question to the other, working together to come up with an answer. And then I'll give them like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm flexible based on how they're finishing, and they move through the whole room and they cover one FRQ for each little subunit. Then at the end, to add another layer of learning, I will have groups switch their handouts and they will grade each other, because we have found that if students know how to score an FRQ accurately, they actually can write them better. And so they will score each other and then give them back, and they walk out of that room with a fully graded, finished FRQ review packet. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. They're getting three exposures to FRQs in that one activity. Now I have to forewarn you, I teach on a block schedule, so I have an hour and a half. My FRQ Fridays, like the normal video handout stuff, it is not an hour and a half. I mean, it might take 30 minutes tops, okay? So just keep that in mind. Don't plan on it for a whole day if you have block schedule. These stations, they are a little bit more of a commitment. I'd say if you do it well, I'd plan for 45 minutes for that to make sure they get through everything and whatnot. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'd love to go more in depth with you if you want. So on this next slide, the ladies and I, these are just some little tips that we wish we had known our first year of teaching APES that we just want to share with you. I am not going to go over all of them with you. You can read them on your own time. There's just a couple that I would like to highlight. So the first one is don't be an island. And I think you guys have already proved that by even coming today. Just applause to you for taking time out of your busy evening for being here. And I would like to encourage you to actually go into the classroom of other great AP teachers in your district or other districts. AP kids, they are not shy. They will tell you what they like. And I will never forget that they would always talk about this AP bio teacher and how she lectured and did her notes, and they loved it. And so I went and I observed her, and sure enough, she was amazing. And I've been teaching for 19 years and I'm still learning new stuff. The other one I wanted to highlight actually piggybacks off what Emily was telling you about pacing. Pacing is everything. So try and use labs that are going to cover multiple concepts or content. It will save you so much time. And I linked Wild About Wetlands in there for you because it's a great one. It will cover trophic levels, food chains, and GPP in one lab. So what would take you 3 days, you can get done in 1 day. So try and find as many of those as you can. Okay. And then the last thing is on my next slide, and use AP Classroom. Don't recreate the wheel. They've all these beautiful questions on there for you. They're worded the same way they're going to see in May. And it is an art to read a MRQ question, a multiple choice question for College Board. They have to pick out the keywords and the question and the answer. And then you definitely need to go over those tests with them and talk about like why this was right and why this was wrong, because they're going to get confused. And then also when your kids sign up for AP Classroom, it automatically enrolls them in the class for the test in May. So very, very important that they sign up for AP Classroom.
And I don't
not
know
only for yourself.
about
go
AP.
ahead.
About AP Classroom, while you were talking about it, I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
saw that they started adding in some of the features that are gonna be also, or already are in Blue Book too, like flagging questions and highlighting things I think is gonna come next or something. So they're working on making AP Classroom more like Blue Book. Because if you guys didn't already hear that APES exam is digital this year, all the exams are gonna be digital this year. So that's gonna be an adjustment for a lot of us to practice, but yes.
I did want to throw out there too, if you guys are like our school, we do have cheating, shocker. And the kids, now that they've taken on Chromebooks, I would encourage you guys to check into Go Guardian. That way you can watch their screens. That's how I've caught all my kids cheating and looking up answers. They also have a lockdown browser that you can look into as well. So. Okay, so we have contact information and time for questions.
Emily, are you still checking the chat for questions
I
right now?
am. I was just responding to one. I could just say it out loud to everyone. APES is still going to be completely digital. Other sciences and maths will do the FRQ on paper. That is not true for AP Environmental Science. It will be entirely digital. So that is definitely still an unknown for a lot of us because we do have the third FRQ does have math on it, but it will not be hybrid. They have said that multiple times. So the AP Calculus, AP Stats, AP Bio, all of those will be hybrid, but APES is not going to be hybrid. It will be entirely digital.
Okay, interesting. So I guess, I mean, I would say like try to give your kids chances to attempt those questions digitally too, like the practice digitally. 'Cause I've always, yeah.
There's been some posts about that on the Facebook group recently, and some examples of what that will look like of showing their math.
That's right. So that'd be like a good thing to search for with that little search tool of how to look for an old post.
Oh, I saw a question in the chat about how I find time to go over all the students' FRQs with them. So after I grade their test, I will actually just pull up the scoring rubric and we like actually just go through it together, and we do test corrections and just gives them a chance to see what they missed, why they missed it. Yeah, it's I actually write feedback on their papers. I just feel like for an AP course, it's really important to give them feedback because the whole idea is that they improve, you know, for May. So.
I do a lot of peer grading. Even when I have small classes, I think it's really a useful, good use of time and a good use of class time for them, like Courtney was saying, to like practice applying the rubric. And then I'll just kind of like go through them really quickly to double check that they seem like they're grading them correctly. And then when they're not, if they're not applying the rubric correctly, I'll talk to the student who was like acting as the grader to make sure that they know how seriously I take it. So that's a strategy that I've done. So I grade very little of them. Usually like when I'm grading FRQs just all by myself, I'll give shortened ones that I'm grading very carefully on my own, not a full 10.1. I don't know, Emily, if you have a different strategy.
No, I like to do smaller chunks because what you'll find, especially earlier on in the class, so most of the FRQs that are on the exams are pulling stuff from 2 or 3 different units. I'm like, well, I don't know this yet. So I'll just pull part of it and just do that rather than start with a big 10.1 right away. So I definitely agree that chunking them out is pretty important. I don't know, Courtney and Chelsea, if you've been in a situation that Elizabeth asked a question about how to best deal with having classes on 2 different days with cheating. This is my first year to have 2 sections of AP Environmental Science, so I've never been in that situation before.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on how to best make it so that they don't cheat, but without having to make 2 entire exams?
Yeah, when I used to have 2 sections, I would make 2 tests, and that was really hard. So I don't know what the best answer is.
It's a little bit easier, I think, to set things up on AP Classroom and set it for a secure browser. So I think that will will help a little bit with that. Yeah, that one's beyond my experience, but I bet that there might be some suggestions from other people in that APES Facebook group too. So it'd be a great question to put out in there.
Gina had asked how many FRQs I use for my FRQ handout stations for 45 minutes. Unit 5 would not work for that because it's so huge. I would, for 45 minutes, I would not go beyond 10. You're going to need all that, and that'll be cutting it close too, because you still want to save time for them to grade each other's. I think that's really important. So yeah, I would keep it for 45 minutes, keep it small.
Any other questions?